Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring music about, or that sounds like, or that alludes to, trains. Today we're going to be looking at a track called Locomotive Breath by Jethro Tull. I don't know what in particular we're going to be looking at here. I think of locomotive breath. I don't know, maybe like a steam engine. Steam coming out or something like that, the breath of a train. Let's dive into it though. Maybe the song will explain it better than the title does. Let's dive in, see what Jethro Tull is bringing to the table today. Isolated piano into something loungy, bluesy, even.
Shuffling madness of the locomotive breath runs the all-time loser headlong to his death. Oh, it feels a piston scraping, steam breaking on his brow. Old Charlie stole the handle, and the train it won't stop going. No, it could slow down.
All of those short staccato notes, whether it's the quick plucking over here,
Stations one by one.
it gives this feeling of anticipation, consistent movement forward even in the slower sections.
Oh, it's crawling down the corridor on his hands and knees. Oh, Charlie stole the handle, and the train it won't stop going. No, it should slow down. Yeah.
All right, that's it. Well, much like a train, can't really change its direction. It can only go in one way, and that's the way the track goes. This song kind of does its own thing and never really changes direction. Well, at least when we disregard the intro, which we'll touch on later. But once the full song comes in, we hit the first verse. It's a pretty straightforward, sort of bluesy rock track. I don't know if I'd classify it completely under blues rock, but the guitar work over here, the way that it sort of vamps around a single idea, and the way that the harmonic elements lean into bluesy progressions, not necessarily full-on blues ones. There's definitely a blues heart at the core of this. But we have the constant just chugging away, this rhythmic device over here, constant eighth notes. We have this guitar over here, which is very syncopated, very rhythmic. We do get pitched movement on it. We do get some melodic components, but to me, it's really just laying down these key notes and rhythmically vamping around them. We have the drums, which kind of lean into this heavy rhythmic device full of accents that this guitar also plays off of. And then we have the vocal melody on top. And that's pretty much the entirety of the song. Eventually, we will trade out the vocals for flute, but they're going to play on top of the exact same ideas that the vocalist would have sung over anyways. I know the vocalist and the flautist are the same person, but this is how I visualize it. Everyone does one job. But the flute ends up playing over the same exact foundation that the vocals do, which kind of puts this in an interesting place because, you know, we do have a loungy, jazzier, bluesier start to this track. And usually within the confines of jazz, the A section and the B section are not identical, not like this. But within the confines of rock, we do typically find this to be more common. So it's interesting that the song put me in a headspace first and then subverted that again. I guess kind of subverted it in the same way that the first subversion was, but I don't know, I think it's because of the bluesier core of this and the start with the piano and guitar in the fashion that they were. I kind of just assumed the solo section would be stripped back, and it ended up not. After the flute solo, we end up going right back to vocal lines that are pretty much identical to what we heard earlier. I don't know if the words themselves are the same, but the melodies certainly are. And then this just fades out on a final chorus, maybe. It is a song that kind of does this one thing really well. And there are two modes to it, technically. There is the very minimal chord progression we have during the verse, and then there is a bit of a dip down to create tension that we hear within the refrain that bursts back up into the less tense verse. And so even during the solo, we kind of see this movement into the tension and then away from it. But again, even that could probably be seen in the scope of a larger chordal movement. And we could probably just see this as a series of A sections where the lead melody switches from vocals to flute. So it's kind of a one-track song. And I think it does what it does well enough, and the length of the song works well in that regard too. I think if this was trying to be 5 or 6 minutes long, I certainly would have been a bit tired of what it was doing. And even with it being 4.5 minutes, the first minute and a half or so is the piano jazzy side of things. So even within just the elements of the rock sound, we're really only getting like 3 to 3.5 minutes of that. It's still a fairly long time for just one concept to not really be iterated on in any way, but it ends up feeling fine enough. And the fade out was quick enough that I think it worked well in that regard too. If it was more drawn out, maybe a slower fade out, I certainly would have felt that. but it is a song that does one thing and just focuses in on that. Now, I was trying to figure out the emotional resonance of this one sound that it does, and there is a bluesy underpinning to it, absolutely. But it's also fun. Rhythmically, it is bouncy. Lots of syncopation and sharp syncopated notes in here. It's very, I don't know the way I would call it like chunky, but I think most people when they hear that would think of size, like a largeness of size. Whereas to me, it's sort of about the abbreviated elements of a lot of the notes. It's the syncopation. No, it's the staccato element of everything here, where there's just so much that's focused on short notes, chunk to chunk, chunk to chunk, 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 just like very short sounds in general, and creating syncopation throughout that. It's really only the vocal and flute lines that, well, let me take that back. Just the vocal lines that have any sort of length to the pitches themselves. The flute ends up being just as syncopated as everything else on this track. So it also works with shorter staccato notes focusing around rhythmic danciness. So yeah, that actually lines up with everything. So we have this fun, bouncy danciness, a little bit of like tension maybe, and then this, I can't call it sorrow. It is a bluesy leaning, but I mean, this isn't like a ballad. This isn't a song that feels depressed. It's not melancholic, but it certainly has a darker color to it. And so I think that's a lot of the bluesiness, but it's fun, dude. And harmonically speaking, I don't know, I guess it's neutral. There's a lot of just sitting on a single chord within this track, and that makes it difficult for me to really pick up on the chordal relationships because it's so rare for us to hear a series of chords in a condensed amount of time that I can feel all of them back to back. It's sort of like a train journey in that sense, where there's not a lot of movement in the moment to moment, but maybe across the entire train ride, if you got like a 5-hour ride ahead of you, maybe you're doing a really long distance train ride, you can certainly, after the fact, kind of pick up maybe 4 key areas divided up into like 4 main moments. But that when you're in the moment, when you're actually on the train ride, everything just kind of blends together. It's just one thing. It's kind of hard to get that perspective on it. I'd love to get some sheet music for this and kind of see the chords there, or maybe get some stems and speed it up in a way that condenses the movements a little bit so I can hear them in a tighter area. But I think generally because of the rhythmic devices and the lack of any heavy negative leanings, it feels mostly neutral to me. It kind of leans positive a little bit, but I can't deny that bluesy element there. And so we have a track that I guess kind of sits around a neutral feeling, which is interesting for a train sound. I'm curious what the lyrics are going to be about then. I want to dive into the lyrics because I feel like that's where it's going to answer some questions, because I have another question to throw into the pile. What is the intro to this? I'm just really, I'm quite flabbergasted by this. I thought it was a pretty cool intro, and in isolation, lovely idea. The piano sounds great. The bluesy electric guitar work next to it is very cool. The transition out of it is actually pretty cool too, as our guitar has been right panned this entire time, and then it grows in size as we move away from a thinner jazz guitar sound into a wider rock guitar sound, and then that pans over, and this guitar is just taken over the entire song. The entire sound sphere is just this guitar now. Very cool transition. But what does it mean? The guitar ends up being one of the less interesting, well, it's more interesting as far as rhythm and melody, but the vocals and flute end up being the defining instruments here. So what does this transition mean? It's more of like a background transition in, say, like a film or something, where you have, I don't know, mountains on way in the background, and then you can use that, and then maybe it like color fades them into making them look a bit more watercolory, and then the camera pans out and look, we've been looking at a painting here and using a background of one image to become a background piece of another image. That's kind of what the guitar feels like to me. It helps us get from one place to the other, but it really isn't the key focus in either of these scenes. Maybe it's just aesthetic. It looks cool. Well, I guess in this case it sounds cool and that's why it works. Maybe it's not supposed to imply anything else. But then again, maybe it is and I just don't get it. But the beginning of this track, despite being cool musically, despite being a solid combo between these two instruments, doesn't really connect to the rest of it at all. We do have this sick blues guitar stuff over here, and the rest of the track is semi-bluesy, but we don't get any traditional blues guitar ideas in here. It really is just a harmonic bluesy leaning. I don't know, it feels so disconnected from the rest of the track that I can't really help but see it as something to understand this piece within. I really hope the lyrics kind of illuminate why this opening is the way that it is. And I'm sure simply because there are Jethro Tull fans out there who are going to call me out on this if I don't bring it up. The flute solo was excellent. I love the virtuosity of it. It's very tight and technical, again, bringing up the staccato playing in a lot of it. It is quick. He mixes in some humming or singing or something alongside it, and that's always cool. We get some cool dyads in that manner. It is over pretty quickly, and it doesn't really deviate anywhere interesting compositionally, but it is a very cool solo, something that I would probably describe as rule of cool, where it works really well, and it is technically impressive. It's probably visually impressive too, but I don't really get too much of an emotional or narrative story out of it. It is something that fills space really well. It fills this entire 16-bar phrase exceptionally well. There's movement within it, but much like the music underneath it, which isn't developing or changing much, this flute solo doesn't develop or change much either. It continues to play rather staccato syncopated ideas through the entire course of its run. And it works. I just don't get any like larger narrative component out of it. But like a solid metal solo, like shred stuff would be, I appreciate the technicality of it. And sometimes it's all a solo needs to be is a little time to show off a little bit. Let's hit some lyrics on this. I'm hoping that'll answer some questions, and then we're going to wrap this one up. Well, we have a steam engine that someone is on, and the brakes are out on it, and that's the song. It is a metaphor for something. The first verse says, "In the shuffling madness of the locomotive breath runs the all-time loser headlong to his death. He feels the pistons scraping, steam breaking on his brow. Old Charlie stole the handle, and the train, it won't stop going, it won't slow down." Verse 1 is interesting because I feel like it is the most metaphorical here, but also the most dangerous. The end of it says that the pistons are scraping. This train is falling apart. Verse 2 says that he sees his children jumping off at the stations one by one. His woman and his best friend are in bed and having fun while he's crawling down the corridor on his hands and knees. The same old chorus here about Charlie stealing the handle. We have the flute solo. Then the final verse says, he hears the silence howling, catches angels as they fall, and the all-time winner has got him by the balls. He picks up Gideon's Bible open at page 1. I said, God, he stole the handle, and the train, it won't stop going, it won't slow down. The beginning seems to imply that whoever's on this train is heading to the end. It says that the all-time loser, our main character in this story, is headlong to his death. He sees other people getting off the train, such as his children, and all he does by the end is to pick up a Bible and say that it won't slow down. There's no stopping this, there's no getting off of the train. It's quite possible that this train is a metaphor for the narrator's life. They can't possibly get off of it because they are the train itself. The pistons screeching and scraping and breaking down is their body breaking down over time as they get older. They realize they can't quite do the things they used to. This is followed up in verse 2 pretty well when it says that he sees his children getting off. He's no longer in charge of them. He's getting so old that his children are now adults. His life is also a bit in the pits as presumably his wife is committing adultery. He may even be drunk because of this, maybe becoming an alcoholic as he's crawling down the corridor on his hands and knees after we learn that his woman and his best friend are in bed having fun. By the end, he turns to religion, hoping for an answer, but he gets none. He picks up a Bible and just says the same thing he's been saying. Charlie stole the handle, and the train won't slow down. I find this to be interesting because the song doesn't slow down, but it also doesn't speed up. It's very consistent in that, but I also don't get a lot of danger from this track, musically at least. It is very fun and lighthearted. But I also wonder about the intro. It is totally different than the rest of it, and in no way would I have ever figured out that this song would be what it is based off of that intro. But I wonder then if the train is the narrator, this is them older in life. Maybe the intro is their youthfulness. And at one point in time, you don't ever really know when, you just become old. There's just a day when you look in the mirror and it's not quite the person you expect to see. You look at your hands and there's more wrinkles there than there used to be. You get out of bed in the mornings and, oh, dude, that back, it's not feeling like the way it used to. It's the little things. The problem is you start realizing a lot of them back to back and kind of just hit that point when you think, dang, dude, when did I get old? And I think about that transition there. The guitar becomes the sound of the song. We transition from the jazzier, playful start to the larger, rockier sound by way of taking that hum of that final notes ringing out on the guitar, sizing it up and transferring it out. It isn't an immediate transition where the piano just stops and the rock band starts. It's a smooth transition over a bit of time. It isn't a quick transition either. It's a full 6 seconds, maybe, of changing this guitar tone into the foundation for the next section. 6 seconds doesn't seem like a lot, but in the realm of rock, which loves to use instantaneous transitions, we were doing this last bar, we are now doing this bar, to take that amount of time to do what it would eventually become more of an electronic focused transition, something sonically focused rather than musically focused. It's intentional. I think the smoothness of movement there is the movement from childhood to adulthood, of feeling young to feeling old. It isn't something that just happens. It takes time. But after a while, all those little things add up and you really get to that point and there's just no turning back from there. The train's going and there's no way to reverse it. No way to slow it down. I don't think every single line in here supports this. I'm not sure about the Charlie stole the handle part. I don't know what that's about. But I do think that that's generally what this song is. The passage of time, and how at a certain point where it feels like we only have time ahead of us, time stops being kind. Years go by in blinks instead of infinities. And it feels like there's just no way to slow it down or stop it. At least those are my thoughts on Jethro Tull's Locomotive Breath. What did you get out of this track? Is there anything in here that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Put all of that, as well as anything else you'd like to, into the comments section below. Above that, in the description box, is a link to Linktree. It'll take you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.